Thanks for joining us for this episode of Coffee with Closers, where business leaders share insights on how to build businesses from the ground up and best practices for innovating in their industry.
Hey, Terrence, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking this opportunity to sit down and talk with me today.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, most certainly. And obviously for the audience that never heard of you, can you share a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking. My name is Terrence Boylan. I'm the founder and CEO of PacketLogix. We are a managed IT department for small to medium businesses in Rhode Island.
Okay.
And we've been doing that for about 20 years now.
Most certainly. That's a pretty lengthy time. You've been at it for since 2000. So
yeah,
it's quite a journey. 2020 marks a big time in your life.
It does. It's this June. It's going to be 20 years, so that should be that's pretty impressive, I guess. I never really thought about it that way. I tend to take things a day at a time, but I guess you add them all up, and that's what it ends up to be.
Most certainly. So obviously you had a pretty good journey, building your company in the last 20 years that you've been at it. But you had a pretty interesting start, right? Can you share a little bit about that entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, I definitely had an interesting start. So I worked for a $5 billion software company, McAfee, and I worked in this one small division that sold protocol analyzers, and I loved it. It was very technical. It was an executive sales process, which I enjoyed, and I was the first person in the history of the territory to ever hit their quota. And so, but they were having a layoff. They were actually breaking up the company, and so what happens when you break up a company is you try and reduce your costs. And so on one Wednesday, 300 of my closest friends and I got laid off across the country. And but right in the exit interview, I wasn't mad or hurt or upset or really fearful even. It was pretty interesting. I said right in the exit interview, well, what if I became a partner, and what if I resold this technology? Because I really like it. I've been a pretty generous pipeline. I've got clients who enjoy working with me, and they said, well, how are you going to do that? And I said, to be honest, I don't know, but I also didn't think I was going to get laid off this morning. So, knowledge that my son would be born 10 days later kind of focused his mind. And, I'm very, very fortunate. I've been very fortunate with great vendors to work with and some amazing customers that have put me on this journey that maybe someday we'll read about it in the book.
That's awesome. So you have a book in the future.
Well, actually, it's funny you say that, because I just finished writing a part of a book that became an Amazon bestseller this past fall called You Are the Number One Target. And it's really about cybersecurity threats and how, in this day and age, small businesses don't think that they're really a target for cybersecurity threats, because they perceive it as a government issue or large corporations. And while those entities certainly have their share of attacks, they also have their fair share of defenses. The small businesses don't, and so that's why they're referred to as what's called a soft target. And the book's largely about that, and each chapter kind of addresses a different issue. It's pretty neat reading. It's available on Amazon now.
That's awesome to hear. So the next book is obviously your journey of how you got here, so I'm assuming is what the next book is going to be about.
It might be. I'm a little skeptical about guys who write autobiographies, but I think it's kind of interesting.
Are you a prolific reader? Do you read a lot? It seems like you write books.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I guess I do read a lot, but not in the conventional sense of, going to school and reading textbooks or reading newspapers or journals or what have you. But most of the content that I tend to focus on tends to be much more discrete in nature, in terms of it's really focused on a very niche particular topic. So as a result, I wind up on Reddit, or I wind up on some closed forums and Teams meetings that other IT executives have, where we kind of collaborate and share social successes, share our failures, which are really equally important to share. And it's really a great community we built up there.
Awesome to hear. So obviously in the 20 years of you building and running a company, you've learned some really meaningful life lessons being an entrepreneur? Are there anything that comes to mind in terms of one of your success where you feel like, wow, this is something that really was pivotal in your journey as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So we certainly have had our upturns and our downturns. Right now we're about 5 people, and you can do a lot with 5 people if you've got the right 5 people. I've been as large as 12. I can't say I really enjoyed it because I didn't have the right 12 people. I was just growing, to be perfectly transparent, out of a sense of ego. I thought I would have a bigger company. I would have more people that worked for me. I didn't think about what they would do, what their job responsibilities would be, how to measure those responsibilities, and what was their overall contribution to the team. I didn't really think that through for hiring them. And when I hear myself say that, I'm thinking, well, that sounds silly, but it's just the truth. It's what happened. And that being said, I think the largest lesson I've learned is don't give up before the miracle happens. So many times, I have thought that this client's never going to hire up. They're never going to do this. And next thing you know, I've got a 12-year history with this client. And I guess I remember a long time ago, I was working out in this gym. And there was there were 2 bodybuilders. They were working out. And one of them was clearly younger and smaller than the other, who was more seasoned, more mature. His muscularity was amazing. And the more seasoned guy kept on yelling at this kid, don't you ever, 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 ever give up. And it just occurred to me, and what I later learned is that kid had made a personal bet. And it just really burned in my mind, like the unbridled need to never give up. And as long as you're pointed in the right direction, your morals are right, and you're doing good for the community, never ever give up. Because when you're the CEO of the company, there's really no one around that's telling you, hey, you've done a great job, good job here, that kind of thing. Every once in a while, a client may tell you that, but people tend to think stuff rolls downhill. That's not my experience. My experience is stuff rolls uphill. And we tend to hear a lot about all of it. So I guess the biggest thing I've learned is never to give up, no matter what. So I think the thing I really learned from that, watching that movie and obviously listening to that piece of history in our country's culture, is that if these guys had just quit or flinched at any point during that mission, it would have ended in catastrophic disaster. But that's not what happened. What happened is they kind of kept their mind, they kept focused, and as a result, this is this amazing success story that so many quotes have come out of that whole mission. It's really been a source of motivation, I think, for probably thousands of people. Yeah,
you're referring to the Apollo, right? The movie Apollo. Okay.
Yeah, the Apollo 13. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think today there's a lot of moonshot initiatives that people have, a lot of innovation projects that they're working on that are such endeavors. I mean, that's 50, 60 years ago, you couldn't have imagined. We didn't even have the kind of high-tech technology today. It's just amazing how they've accomplished such a massive undertaking, right? With not having this kind of fast internet or the video calls or any of those things. It's just crazy how they were able to do that.
Yeah.
So ahead of their time.
So far, when I would say a little over 20 years ago, I worked for this internet startup. And essentially what the startup was trying to do was what Google wound up doing, and doing extraordinarily well. But I remember thinking the tools that we were using then, we just thought we were at the this pointy end of the spear in terms of technology. And we were at that point. But looking back on it, just things as common as your cell phone, and if anybody remembers a Palm Pilot, and all those things they're completely antiquated. Now you've got more of that in your watch than we did in several devices before. So it's really amazing to watch not just the technology innovation for the sake of technology's innovation, but to address a specific need. And I'm dying of curiosity to see how this whole COVID-19 situation we find ourselves in is going to spawn all sorts of innovation in pharmaceuticals, in biotechnology, in testing methodology, and vaccine innovation. I mean, because there are some extremely bright people working on that right now, I am sure.
Yeah.
And to see how that comes out will be very interesting, actually.
And obviously, I think entrepreneurs are the ones that, right, like they see a challenge, and if they don't give up is when they can actually do accomplish things that if they just gave up, it would never happen.
That's right, yeah.
So it's an amazing character an entrepreneur need to have. Obviously, other lessons learned. Was there one of your big wins that you're very proud of from your 20 years journey running this company?
Yeah, there's a few actually. I think in general, finding usually a corporate enterprise customer, an IT department, and then working with them to work through whatever their particular project is, and then gaining the trust and building the relationship with those individuals that were involved. Because ultimately, I'm not selling from logo to logo. I'm selling person to person. And so those relationships I really cherish, value. Many of them I've had the entire time I've had my company, almost all 20 years. But one in particular does stick out. I remember I got this call. We do a lot in wireless design. So we design large hospitals, basketball stadiums, military theaters, that kind of thing. And I got a call from a potential client that wanted me to build some kits so that we could train their employees how to do this kind of work. And so I built the kit, and I said, if you'd like, we can come on site and train your team how to do what it is that we do. I mean, after all, we see hundreds of venues every year. You learn a lot about how wireless works. And they said, okay, I said, I'll come down to Herndon. For some reason, I thought they were in Herndon, Virginia. And the woman said, we're not in Herndon, we're in Baghdad. And I said, okay, fine, that's great. And it's almost like I didn't hear her. That was that. I couldn't get the customer on the line, and I figured I had lost the project. And 6 months later, a woman, Rhonda, called me and said, hey, my name is Rhonda. I'm with XYZ Company, and I'm here to do your security clearance intake. And I legitimately thought it was one of my friends pulling a joke on me, but it wasn't. Next thing you know, 2 weeks later, I'm on this C-130 in body armor flying over Baghdad, and went to a couple different bases there and trained people how to use wireless networking to keep up what they call the MWR, a morale, welfare, and recreation network, so that soldiers and airmen and sailors and what have you could communicate with their loved ones back home. And that was really rewarding because it was one of the first times where I was actually able to see in real time, fix this problem. This soldier can talk to his daughter at home. I mean, I saw that several times that month. And, that was, I feel very fortunate to have been a part of that, actually.
That is a crazy story. Not a lot of IT companies can say that they had that in their...
Probably not.
Yeah, so obviously, building a company, like you said, you were at a time like 12 employees, and now you're 5 core people that are doing an extraordinary job. You had to have had some change in your leadership styles, and you had to have kind of adapt things as things evolved. Where do you put yourself in terms of your leadership style, and what's your category that you would say you're in?
It's a really great question. I mean, I tend to be very laid back. Some might say too laid back. I tend to be very transparent. I've heard all along over the time that, employees want to know everything. And, there's certain things that I want to share with my employees, and other things which I don't want to share with my employees. But interestingly enough, what I have found is that employees only want transparency as long as it's good news. They're not so interested in the real bumps in the road. I've been very fortunate since founding the company. I've never gone into debt. I've never done the mortgage on the house thing. I've never done the credit card run-up thing. We operate on a full cash basis. When we need to buy an asset, whether it's a trailer or a truck or what have you, we buy it all in cash. But there's been some times where it hasn't been that pretty. And my experience is employees don't want to know those times. They only want to know when we're riding on the crest of the wave, not when we're in the trough and the crest is about to crash. But overall, it's been a great trip. It's been a heck of a journey, and I think my leadership style tends to be empathetic. I pick one word. Because you hire people, and everybody hires somebody thinking they're going to do wonderful, amazing things for the organization. They're going to bring a new level of marketing or a new level of sales or engineering or whatever it is that their specialty is. And many people don't work out. That's just kind of how it works. And I don't think I'm unique in that regard. But working with that person all along their whole lifetime with you is pretty interesting. I've had employees that have lasted 12 years, and heck, when he left, we left on very favorable terms. He's actually a client now. It was I really underestimated my personal interaction with my employees. I've had others that have been with me 8 years, 6 years, 7 years, some 13. So it's business at this altitude, at the altitude I operate on, it's very, very personal, and I think it can be very rewarding. I find it very rewarding, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're talking loyalty, like some core loyalty there is to have someone work for you 12 years. That's not easy to come by in today's day and age.
No, it's not easy to come by. And this one particular fellow, his name is Ben. He was more of a partner than he was an employee. And it's interesting. I only see that now. When he worked for me, I didn't see that then. I see it now. And he left due to somebody, as the phrase goes, somebody made him an offer he couldn't refuse. They offered him something I just couldn't offer. And it wasn't money. It was more of a life situation kind of thing. But and I'm happy for him. Personally, I'm happy for him. I mean, he made a really great decision. But it's been a good trip. It's been a good trip so far.
That's good to hear. Obviously, you shared some really good advice in terms of never giving up and having kind of a leadership style that's more open and welcoming and running with empathy. And then we also shared some of the things about the way that you would you need to go forward when you're trying to build a culture and going and winning accounts and things of that nature. But essentially, from your experience and having done this for over 20 years, what advice do you have for somebody who's a young entrepreneur just trying to get their head started on this journey of building a company? Like, what advice do you have for some young entrepreneur?
It's a great question. I would a couple of things. I would probably make sure I had a really solid plan. A plan of what you're going to do, why someone even cares about it. Is it a really need-to-have item or service? Is it a nice-to-have item? Nice-to-haves tend to get let go first. Need-to-haves stay on through the difficult times. And the other thing I would say is, and I don't know whether it's luck or what have you, but be mindful of your thoughts, as the phrase goes. Pay attention very closely to who you surround yourself with, who you listen to, whose advice, guidance you heed. Because sometimes those mentors, whether they're specific mentors and they're outwardly stated, you form a relationship, or they're not so formal, more people you look up to in business. Those people, those relationships, very well could have a much larger influence on you than you think.
So making sure that you're basically building a good network and connections that can also build you up.
Yeah, I would say so, and be a salesman. I mean, I have never met and I say that in the pure sense of the word, like a professional, not a cheesy car sales guy, not somebody who's hawking a product in a place that it doesn't belong. I mean, a true professional, someone who's empathetic and someone who's concerned about the clients or prospective clients' end result. Because every CEO I've ever met that I've really respected has had that quality about them. That they have this kind of charisma that they can take on the world, and what they've got is the greatest thing in the world. And many times it has been. Many times it has been, and has been revolutionary for their particular industry.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be, as the leader of the company, trust in your product and trust in what you're bringing to the market. If you don't have faith in your own product, you can't really be a good leader to lead that company forward. right?
Yeah, there's probably one other thing I would say. It took me a while to figure this out. Surround yourself by the best possible people you can hire for the money you have. Everybody has too little money. $10 billion companies have too little money. They don't have enough money to hire the people that they want, but there's not enough talent or whatever it is. Everybody has a hiring issue. But the point is hire the best people you can. And that doesn't necessarily mean the sales reps who bring in the most money. That doesn't necessarily mean the kind of superstar engineers that can do it all themselves. You want people who can play well in a team environment. You want people who appreciate their contribution to a larger whole. But at the end of the day, you do want really smart people. You really want smart people.
Yeah, I've often heard, and I think I don't remember if it was specifically in a book or someone I talked to, they said hire people who are smarter than you, because what you want is you want to be able to replace yourself, because every hire that you hire should be figuring out a way, how do you replace yourself and what you do, right? That you can delegate things that you don't necessarily have to do anymore if you have the right team in your right people in your team, essentially.
Yeah, it's a great point. When I look back on the employees that I've had over the last 20 years, the ones that were superstars, in my opinion, they were clearly smarter than I was about what I had to do. They were clearly brighter. They brought more to the table. They thought a way of doing things, methods, procedures, policies, whatever, that I just didn't think of. I just didn't think on that kind of level. And I think that's one of the key points that made them such rock stars. I think that's a really, really great point.
Yeah, and especially as entrepreneurs, we're visionaries, and you need some practitioners or tactical experts that know how to execute certain things or see things beyond what you just see immediately, right? You see a big picture, but they have to go behind the scene and see, okay, can we technically execute it the way that you're envisioning it, right? And what possible things go wrong, and then being able to get in front of the problem before it ever happens. I think those are the kinds of teammates that you certainly need in your team, especially as you're building up a corporation.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at all the different kinds of people that I've worked with, the ones that are autonomous, that think independently, that think differently than how others think, those are the ones that make a meaningful contribution to the culture, to your organization as a whole. The ones that you kind of have to lead and tell them what exactly is their job, and they're not going to help you define it, and they really need to be over-managed, and it's not a place I want to be in. I don't want to micromanage people. It's just not what I want to do. I expect people to be kind of autonomous and know their role and know what they need to do, and let's collaborate about the things that we don't know, and let's figure out how to get there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also kind of my way of thinking as well. A lot of times you can think about I need to write a process or procedure for how to do certain things, but not every scenario in a business is oftentimes it's like I can go through a checklist and get it done, right? You kind of have to think on the fly. I mean, it's kind of like the Sally when he was flying and taking off from New York, right? He didn't expect the flight to crash into Hudson River, but essentially he had a lot of practice. But you can't write every scenario in a book and say, hey, here's the documentation for every possible scenario of business challenge you're ever going to run in. Nobody wrote a procedure for COVID-19, how to run a business when there's COVID-19, right? You kind of have to build a flight while it's flying, right? And so it's a good segue for me to even find out how are you as a company kind of pivoting right now, or how are you helping your clients to kind of better suit themselves for what's ahead with all that is going on around us?
Great question. So we are a managed IT department. So what we do is we manage small and medium businesses IT, from the internet circuit to their cloud environment to the desktop servers, everything. If it's got a chip in it, we will manage for them. And what we found is what used to be a nice to have, which was people working from home, is now a core part of how IT functions. So we've been working with a lot of clients about getting them to be remote work empowered. Most often that's from home. But many times it's just from the road, or some of the people who are emergency workers from a hotel room, that kind of thing. But I think that IT is going to play a much stronger role in empowering and enabling workforces down the road. It very well would not surprise me if there was a shrinking of office space in the future. Because, I mean, we've been working from, for the first 15 years of the company. I mean, I worked out of my house. No clients ever visit us. We always go to their data center or to their office or to their factory or their warehouse. Clients never came and visited us. And then as the organization started to grow, we started to do more build projects, in office space. And that's what we have now. But I think that the technology around remote connectivity is going to mature. I think that its reliance is going to mature. And we've even had Zoom meetings where my family, so we've got people who, my dad was from 84 down to my nephew, I think he's 6. And everything there in between on this 13-person Zoom call for our family. And it's pretty interesting just to see how that transformation is taking place. Here was clearly a tool for corporate collaboration and communication of dispersed teams, and now you've got all sorts of organizations using it. I mean, even the medium that we're using now, Skype, a video call, is allowing us to communicate and present this material to a far wider audience than we could have done before. We had to meet together and meet in the studio and all that kind of things. So, I'm pretty excited, actually. I do see it as an opportunity in my particular industry. I think in biotech and pharmaceuticals, it's a tremendous opportunity because I think people will look at the way that they work differently. They will look at the way they socialize differently than, for COVID-19. Some in good ways, some probably not so good.
Yeah, I mean, there are, of course, there's some industry that's going to struggle a lot, but I think other industries are going to be born out of this. Like you just described, some of those industries are going to be having to pivot and then probably even see some more growth potential in certain verticals, especially, right? And with what you've been through and also just the COVID-19 as well as these 20 years of building this company, is there anything you would do differently if you had to do it all over again?
Yeah. That's a really great question, actually. If I could do one thing differently, so I started the company, like I told you, I laid off from this job, and they gave me a small severance. I took that severance and I bought a laptop because I didn't have a laptop. It was the company's laptop. You got to give it back to them. So I bought a laptop and some hard drives so that I could demonstrate this very technical product that I was selling. And from that day to this day, I've never borrowed money. I've never really had a loan. I don't have any debt. I've been kind of, I guess they call it bootstrapping. I don't know what it's called, but I've been just providing the financing myself. However, if I had a different financial backing, more financial backing, I think that early on, I probably would have made a bunch of stupid choices and wasted the money. But as I matured, and I think this is probably pretty typical of most of my friends who own companies, as you mature, you find out what really works, what's impactful for your company, and what doesn't. And so I think an investment of, say, $250,000 now would be very differently allocated than $250,000 20 years ago, right? Much more larger mistakes and almost wasted the money. So I guess if there's one thing that I could recommend, make sure you're adequately financed, because you don't want to have a marketing plan that you can't execute. It's the best marketing plan in the world. If you can't execute it, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, leveraging capital from leveraging other people's cash to scale your organization, which is becoming extremely more popular now with all these tech startups, right? You got a great idea, there's a bunch of angel investors or venture capital is available to fund that idea because they know 1 out of every 100 is going to be a success, right? And they're hoping for that next Facebook, right? And that's why there's so much cash available today. But your point is extremely important because a lot of times I think people prematurely take money before they actually perfected a product or a solution, and then they can't make money out of it, right? That they're just trying to like refine and refine because they haven't really found the product market fit, and then they just don't know what more to do, right? They keep adding more features, but they haven't really figured out who is this going to really benefit. Is this really going to solve a business problem? Are people willing to pay for that, whatever that additional feature or whatever that might be, right? But instead, they're just spending so much energy in engineering costs and marketing costs, things like that. So I think that's an important point, because once you really refine your product and refine your business, then go find the cash you need to scale, as opposed to taking cash premature and you're like a little kid, right? You don't know what to do with it. And
right.
Right.
I made tremendously poor decisions when I was 20 years old with my first real job that paid money, as opposed to now.
Exactly. In closing, can you share your story of how you ended up in Harvard and got a degree from there?
Yeah. So I didn't really graduate college on the normal path that most people do. And so I was living in Boston, and I always knew I had to get my undergraduate degree. I mean, that was just, I come from a line of educators. My dad's been a principal for 30 years. I think he's got a master's, a PhD. My mom has a master's in art. So I knew I had to at least get my bachelor's degree. And, living in Boston, I mean, there's a million schools there. So I could kind of at least have my pick as close to what I do. I thought, gosh, if you're going to do this, there's really one school that you probably can't get into, but let's try. So I submitted the application. I wrote the best essay that I could, and it seemed to work out pretty well. So
that's awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to finding that book on Amazon. I don't know if you have any closing wisdom or parting wisdom for our audience.
Yeah, I think that, the biggest thing is to, really believe in yourself, because there are going to be a million times when no one around you will. No one. And making sure you truly are adding value to another person's or a company's life is that knowledge will kind of carry you through a lot of moments of doubt, which will come. They will come.
Most certainly. Well, that's a great word to end this. I certainly appreciate you taking this time, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Take care. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
This episode of Coffee with Closers is brought to you by One IMS, a leading digital marketing agency helping businesses win new customers. To request a free marketing ROI audit, please visit oneims.com. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. To make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe.